You still remember the moment the DeLorean hit 88 miles per hour.
It's fun to watch.
The flash of light. The rising whine. And for a split second, the dark living room seemed to hold its breath. Back to the Future wasn't just a movie. It was the first time the future walked straight into your home. And that was only one of 20 things only people who grew up in the 1980s truly remember. 20 memories bound by the same feeling. The world once felt slower, clearer, and full of a quiet, almost innocent hope. Thing number 1. Back to the Future. You didn't just watch Back to the Future, you lived with it. For weeks, it kept coming back, on the living room TV, in conversations at school, inside your imagination. You remember the blue glow on the walls, the low hum before the VCR kicked in, and the thrill every time Doc Brown appeared, hair wild, eyes blazing with impossible ideas. Time travel didn't feel complicated back then. It didn't need charts or long explanations. It just needed a car, a crazy idea, and the courage to floor it. Marty McFly wasn't a perfect hero. He felt familiar, a little unsure, a little reckless, trying to figure things out in a world run by confusing adults. That's what made the story feel real. What stayed with you wasn't the plot. It was the feeling that the future was wide open. That technology was exciting, not overwhelming. And that somehow, tomorrow was going to be better than today. Only people who grew up in the 1980s remember believing that so completely. Thing number 2. Michael Jackson on the radio. You didn't need to see Michael Jackson to feel him. The radio did all the work. You remember where you were the first time Billie Jean came on? The way the beat snapped into place. The way everything else just stopped. Cars slowed. Conversations paused. Fingers tapped steering wheels without thinking. Thriller wasn't just an album. It was background noise to life. Playing in kitchens, bedrooms, roller rinks, and car stereos with loose knobs. You recorded songs off the radio, hoping the DJ wouldn't talk over the intro. Michael made ordinary days feel cinematic. Like something important was happening, even if you were just doing homework or riding in the back seat. Thing number 3, MTV. When it actually played music. There was a time when MTV felt like a window into another world. You turned it on and just left it there. Music videos weren't content. They were events. You discovered bands by accident, sitting too close to the TV, watching images that felt rebellious, stylish, and just a little dangerous. You didn't choose the next song. MTV did, and somehow that made it better. It felt like being part of something bigger, a shared rhythm everyone your age understood. Fashion, attitude, even how you stood in front of a mirror came from what you saw there. You didn't call it influence back then. It was just life. Thing number 4. The Sony Walkman. The first time you put on a Walkman, the world changed. You pressed play, and suddenly, life had a soundtrack. The foam headphones felt strange at first. The click of the cassette door, the gentle whir as the tape started moving. Music wasn't shared anymore. It was yours. You walked differently with a Walkman. Slower, more thoughtful, like you were inside a movie only you could hear. Streets, school hallways, bus rides, all of it felt more personal. And those mixtapes, they mattered. Songs chosen carefully, rewound with patience. Sometimes eaten by the machine, sometimes saved forever. Thing number 5. Saturday morning cartoons. Saturday mornings had a sound. The TV clicking on early. Cereal pouring into a bowl. Cartoons loud enough to wake the house. You didn't binge watch. You waited all week for this. Pajamas still on. Feet on the carpet. No adults telling you to change the channel. Transformers, Thundercats, Ninja Turtles. Each show felt like a reward for surviving the school week. Commercials weren't interruptions. They were part of the ritual. Toys you wanted, snacks you begged for. By noon, it was over, and somehow that made it perfect. Thing number 6, Pac-Man at the arcade. You could hear Pac-Man before you saw it. That steady waka waka waka, echoing through the arcade or the corner of the mall. The glow of the screen. The crowd forming quietly behind whoever was playing really well. Your hands smelled like quarters. You learned patience waiting your turn, watching patterns, memorizing ghosts. There was pride in making it to the next level. Real pride. This wasn't gaming alone in a bedroom. This was public. Social. A small performance. When you lost, someone else stepped in. When you won, strangers nodded like they knew you. Pac-Man didn't need a story. It didn't need updates. It just needed skill and nerve. Thing number 7. The Nintendo Entertainment System. When the NES came into the house, it felt serious. You remember opening the box. The weight of the controllers, blowing into the cartridge like it was a ritual, and somehow it worked. Mario wasn't just a character. He was a companion. You learned timing. You learned frustration. You learned how to try again after failing the same jump 20 times. Families gathered around the TV. Turns were negotiated. Progress was earned, not saved automatically. If you had to stop, you remembered exactly where you were. The NES didn't just bring games home. It brought focus, commitment, quiet determination. Thing number 8. Cabbage Patch Kids. You didn't just buy a Cabbage Patch Kid. You hunted one. Stores sold out. Parents whispered. News stories showed crowds that looked almost unreal. And when you finally got one, if you got one, it felt personal. Each doll had a name, a birthday, a face that somehow felt unique, even when you knew it wasn't. You held it close, like it chose you back. This wasn't about plastic or stuffing. It was about belonging. About having something everyone wanted, and knowing how lucky you were. Thing number 9. G.I. Joe on the living room floor. G.I. Joe didn't stay in the box. He hit the carpet hard. Missions were planned. Battles sprawled across couches, stairs, and imagination. You created worlds without instructions. The cartoon filled in the gaps. Heroes and villains. Catchphrases you repeated without irony. You knew who Cobra was, and why they mattered. What mattered most was control. You decided who won, who survived, who came back for the sequel tomorrow afternoon. There was no pause button on childhood, just toys left where they fell, waiting for the next story. Thing number 10. Leg warmers and the fitness craze. The 80s believed movement could fix things. Leg warmers everywhere. Neon colors. Headbands soaked through. Jane Fonda on the TV, telling adults, and sometimes kids, to keep going. Living rooms turned into workout spaces. Furniture pushed aside. VHS tapes rewound again. It wasn't subtle. It was loud, optimistic, and completely sincere. You didn't question it. This was just how grown-ups stayed young. How energy looked back then. Those leg warmers weren't about fashion. They were about effort. About showing up. About believing you could improve yourself with enough sweat and music. Thing number 11. Renting movies on VHS. Going to rent a movie was an event. You walked the aisles slowly, reading the backs of boxes like they were promises. New releases were always gone. The good ones, anyway. Sometimes you settled. Sometimes you argued. The plastic case felt heavy in your hands. The cover art mattered. Horror movies looked terrifying. Action films looked unstoppable. And when the movie ended, you rewound the tape because that's what decent people did. Forgetting meant a fee. Everyone learned that lesson once. Movie night wasn't endless choice. It was commitment. Whatever you brought home, that's what you watched. Thing number 12, the boombox. The boombox was not subtle. It was heavy, loud, and somehow necessary. You carried it on your shoulder like a statement. Music wasn't private. It was shared, whether everyone wanted it or not. Parks, basketball courts, sidewalks. Wherever you went, the beat came with you. Cassette clicked in. Play button pressed hard. Volume turned just a little higher than polite. Boomboxes weren't about convenience. They were about presence. About saying, "This is my sound, and I'm here." You didn't skip tracks easily. You listened to whole sides. You lived with the music. Thing number 13, Ghostbusters. You still hear the question, who ya gonna call? Ghostbusters wasn't scary exactly. It was thrilling. Funny. Just dangerous enough to feel grown up even when you weren't. The proton packs looked real enough. The ghosts felt close. Like they might be hiding in your own house after dark. And that theme song, once it started, you were in. You quoted it at school. You wore the logo until it cracked. Halloween was never the same again. This wasn't just a movie. It was a shared joke the whole country seemed to get at once. Thing number 14, The Goonies. The Goonies made you believe adventure was nearby. Not in space. Not in some distant future. Just past the edge of your neighborhood, if you were brave enough to look. You watched it sprawled on the floor, eyes wide, heart racing. Treasure maps. Hidden tunnels. Friendship that felt real and messy and loyal. You didn't want to be a hero. You wanted to be part of the group, to belong to something that mattered, even if adults didn't understand it. After the movie, you went outside. You explored. You imagined more. Thing number 15, neon fashion and shoulder pads. The ATS didn't do subtle. Colors were loud. Shapes were bold. Shoulder pads made everyone look ready for battle, even at the office. Neon wasn't trying to look cool. It just was. Jackets, leggings, windbreakers that sounded like weather when you moved. You wore it without irony. Fashion back then felt fearless. A little ridiculous, maybe, but confident, like the decade itself didn't apologize. You look back now and laugh. But you also remember how it felt to wear something bright and believe it worked. Only people who grew up in the ATS remember when style was about showing up and being seen. Thing number 16, Polaroid instant cameras. You took the picture and then you waited. The photo slid out warm and blank, and everyone leaned in. No touching. No shaking, because someone always said not to. Slowly, an image appeared, like a secret revealing itself. Polaroids weren't perfect. Colors were off. Faces a little soft. But that was the magic. It felt real, physical. Yours to keep. You taped them to refrigerators. Slid them into wallets. Lined them up on dressers like proof that the moment actually happened. There was no deleting, no filters, no second try. Thing number 17, hanging out at the mall. The mall wasn't just a place. It was where life happened. You met friends without texting. You walked laps without buying anything. Sunglasses stayed on indoors. Music floated out of record stores. The arcade buzzed quietly in the corner. Food courts smelled like pretzels and pizza grease. You shared fries. You watched people. You felt older just being there. Parents dropped you off. and trusted you'd figure it out. Hours passed unnoticed. The mall gave you independence before the internet ever could. Only people from the 80s remember when freedom had a food court and nowhere else to be. Thing number 18. Fashion that made noise. Clothes in the 80s weren't quiet. Windbreakers crinkled. Nylon pants whispered when you walked. Jackets swished with every move. You felt your clothes as much as you wore them. Bright colors, big shapes, shoulder pads that made even shy people stand taller. It wasn't about blending in. It was about showing up. Even if it looked strange later, you didn't overthink it. You just put it on and went outside. Thing number 19. The soundtrack of everyday life. The 80s always had music playing. From car radios crackling at stoplights, to boomboxes in parks, to arcade machines chiming in the background. You didn't curate a playlist. Songs found you. In stores. In elevators. In passing cars with windows down. Music stitched the day together. It made ordinary moments feel bigger than they were. Even silence felt different back then, because you knew sound would return soon. Thing number 20. Growing up without being reachable. When you left the house, you were gone. No tracking. No instant updates. Just trust and time. You checked in when you got home. Not before. Not during. You figured things out on your own. Got bored. Got creative. Got lost sometimes. And somehow, that made you confident. The world felt bigger, slower, more forgiving. Only people who grew up in the 80s remember when being unreachable felt normal and kind of wonderful. Looking back now, it's clear it was never just about the toys, the movies, or the music. It was about how it all felt. We grew up in the space between analog and digital. We learned patience before speed. We learned how to wait, how to wonder, how to be bored, and how to turn boredom into something meaningful. The 1980s didn't rush us. They let moments linger. They gave us room to grow without watching every step. And even now, decades later, those memories still feel solid, like something you can reach back and touch. So here's the question: what's the one thing from the 80s you still carry with you? Not in a box, but in the way you see the world. Share it in the comments. And if this felt like home, consider subscribing.